Hey everyone, thank you for the kind introduction, for the amazing talks that preceded me. I'm starting to see the topic of this panel crystallizing, and it's very good because I want to talk about some of the same issues about the tension between the future and the present, but I'm going to go into the far, far future. So actually the subtitle of my talk, how do we tell our children's children that we sucked, is better represented like this. It just doesn't fit on when I try to submit talks to ISVIS. So it's actually how do we tell our children's children that we sucked, because we are going to be talking about the far future and our impact on that future and how we might use data visualization to help them out just a tiny bit. But first, a few caveats. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for two reasons. One, I'm going to swear. Because it's climate change and it's awful and it helps me get across my negativity in a productive way. And second of all, I'm sorry because this is going to be a very depressing presentation and there is no bottom line and there is nothing that can be done except for more questions to be asked. So now that I've apologized, I can go to the next presentation and start swearing. In case you didn't know, we're fucked, right? In the past few weeks, it's actually become more clear how fucked we really are. I don't know if you've been following the news, but India is experiencing the worst heat wave in the history of humanity, basically, with temperatures reaching up to, and some very specific cases, above 50 degrees Celsius. 50 degrees Celsius, right? And even if you look at the good scenarios, that is the scenarios where we do a complete 180 turn, everything changes, we stop using plastics, we cut down on carbon emissions, we're still talking about widespread famine and millions of people in poverty and so on. So no matter how you slice it, we're pretty much screwed. But the worst thing is that it's not, we didn't just fuck ourselves, we also fucked all of these guys. So this is, imagine this is our ancestral tree. I literally went into Google and typed in ancestral tree, so I don't know who this represents. Apologies if it's anyone here by any chance. But if you imagine us at the top of this thing or at the bottom, whichever way you want to slice this visualization, all of these people are fucked, right? Our children's children and their children and so on. The rhinoceros, the white rhinoceros that was cited in the previous talk will take centuries, if not millennia, to recover from the accident that is called the human race. Icebergs will take millennia to recover from warming and so on and so forth. Depressing enough yet? Or okay. So in case it wasn't depressing enough yet, climate change is this hyper object. It's made up of all different parts, and we have the parts that we like. We like to talk about this stuff, right? Carbon emissions. Everybody knows that the climate is warming. This is not radical or interesting. It's become mainstream. And that's a victory, right? That it is mainstream. But the thing that we are doing a really bad job at understanding is that it's not just carbon emissions and it's not just increasing temperatures. It's also deforestation. That looks like this. In case you've never seen it, it's awful. I'm sorry again. This gets more depressing now. The species die off. This was taken in the US, right? Not in some place that we don't care about in the third world or so on, where in 2015 there was a mass die-off of birds all across the US, and I'm talking about millions and millions of birds, if you think about that biomass. And then other species that are, of course, becoming extinct or suffering from the effects of human-created anthropological climate change. And I could keep going and show you more depressing stuff. But this is the good stuff that I want to talk about. In case you've never seen it, this is nuclear waste. This is what nuclear waste actually looks like. It doesn't look like what it looks like on The Simpsons or on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's not like a green glowing thing. This is an actual barrel from a US nuclear waste facility, sliced in half for educational purposes, and it looks bad. The real bad thing about this stuff is that this is the time that it will take it to become harmless. When I say harmless, it will take a lot less time for it to not become actively radiating. That is, in 10,000 years, you could probably be in the vicinity of that barrel and nothing will happen to you. But it will take 1 million years until it becomes completely harmless. That is, you could put it in your water and drink it for whatever stupid reason you might do that. So it's not just that the things that we're doing is screwing up 10,000 years, which is an amazing amount of time, or 50,000 years, which is even more amazing, but 1 million years. our impacts, the mistakes that we made, the choices that we made will keep on impacting the planet that we live on. Again, I'm really sorry that I'm doing this to you. So, okay, so we accept that fact and we're going to be affecting the future forever, basically. So the least we could do is warn them, right? All those people that we screwed, that we fucked, the least we could do is warn them. Or is it, right? Because there's still stuff that we could do and choices that we could make. I'm not a complete doomer, right? I'm not saying that it's over and we should all enjoy our time in Gomorrah before we all die. There are still stuff that we could do, but the least we could do is tell those people, hey guys, I'm so sorry, but this is what we did. But how? How do you communicate with people who live in 1 million years? Do you use literature? We basically, the literature that we have that survived today in fragments is about 5,000 to 6,000 years. That's nothing compared to 1 million. Science, do we know that people will have the laboratories needed to interpret our data and to understand it? Do we even know that what language they'll be speaking? Or if they'll be speaking a language? What language should we use to communicate with them? When you think about it, there is one thing that seems attractive to communicate with those people, and that's the symbol. The symbol contains meaning in a way which is more primal and which responds better to erosion than words, right? When we use symbols, there is something unmediated, something that is simpler, that is more elegantly conveyed than when we use words. Or at least I think every single person in this room would like to believe that's true, because otherwise, what are you doing? So out of this, combining symbol and meaning and how we communicate it with the idea of nuclear waste, we get this fancy term called nuclear semiotics. Semiotics, for those of you who haven't studied philosophy, is the science of communicating meaning in our rituals, in our art, in our body language, in our symbols, and so on. And nuclear, we all know what nuclear is. And by the way, you all know nuclear semiotics. You all know what this does and how it works, because there are already symbols that communicate the nuclear danger. Well, not these ones, but they're based on this, the trefoil design, right? 3 leaves, and Adidas also stole it for their logo, but you know it as this, right? This is nuclear semiotics. In the 60s, when more research on atomics was being done in Berkeley, a scientist, this is the legend, right? A scientist started sketching, and they came up with the trefoil. And we all know what it is, and if you show this to maybe, well, some of you, maybe to you as well, and certainly to my parents, this symbol was feared. This was the apocalypse. This symbol became everything that was bad in the world, and even today, if you go and watch the recent Godzilla movie, for some reason they always do the origin story, right? So they go to the island, and the first shot they pan across, and they see the trefoil, right? The nuclear radiation, mutation, all that stuff. Nuclear semiotics has also become more and more popular over the recent years. This is taken from a really good article that appeared in Current Affairs by Eileen McCrea with illustrations by Scotch, really good artist, by the way, and it shows this idea of a future society breaking open a nuclear repository. And in this article, titled "We Considered Ourselves to be a Powerful Culture," and we'll soon see where that came from, McCrea asks us to imagine the following scenario. You're a scientist, and you come across the remains of an ancient civilization. And no one has been there before. You found like the one ziggurat that the British didn't plunder or whatever. You're the first person there. And you go inside, and there's a box. You find a box that supposedly belonged to a civilization 10,000 years ago. And the box clearly says, "Do not open me." It has like skulls all over it, and snakes spitting poison, and it just screams at you, "Don't do it, don't open the box. There's something super dangerous inside this box." So of course you're not gonna open the box. But wait. If you open the box, your career is made. You will be the scientist that opened the box and found the box. And maybe you don't care about your career, but think about the knowledge. Think about the potential. Think about what might be in that box. And what McCrea wants us to understand is that every single one of us would open that box, no matter how much the warnings were severe. The last thing that we'd say is, hey, these guys, they lived 10,000 years ago. What could possibly be in this box? Like, what's the big deal? I have planes and atomic bombs and lasers and medicine, and surely I can cure whatever is in this box. And if you think you wouldn't open the box, we've already opened the box. like the Egyptian sarcophagus, most of them said, don't open this box, or you will be cursed forever, right? To protect, of course, the remains of royalty and so on. Now, of course, the box wasn't actually cursed, but think about what if there's nuclear radiation in that box. And it was 10,000 years ago, and those guys are all dead, and it says, don't open the box. How do we get them to not open the freaking box? So the United States government also asked this question in the 80s and then in the 90s, and it called into being this task force using the private sector, specifically Sandia Labs. Forget that detail, but it will come up in a sec. And that task force, which was comprised of linguists, anthropologists, nuclear scientists, communication specialists, and other people across the humanities and the sciences, convened 2 times. The one that we care about is 1993. 1984 also created a very interesting report, but it was very technical and very boring and had no visualizations. And the report in 1993, which was commissioned by Sandia Labs that I just mentioned, was much more interesting. To be accurate, it had 2 groups. Team A, super boring, no visualizations almost, and a lot of dry stuff. But Team B was really weird. They decided to open the report with Shelley's Ozymandias, one of the most famous poems of the Romantic period. You don't have to read the entire thing, but specifically the most famous part. My name is Ozymandias, king of kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. And this is in a plaque below a destroyed statue of a king no one remembers. All of the powerful kings thought they were the most powerful, and then they died. And their statues were eroded, and no one remembers who they are, right? And yet, their works were mighty, and all future generations should despair. So basically, we are Ozymandias etching our own plaque, right? And telling future generations to despair. This is the basic message that Team B recommended be etched on the outside of the nuclear repository for all of the US's nuclear waste. This place is not a place of honor. No highly esteemed deed is commemorated here. Nothing valued is here. What is here was dangerous and repulsive to us. The danger is still present in your time as it was in ours. The danger is to the body, and it can kill. This place is a message and part of a system of messages because they designed this to be spread out across the entire US. Pay attention to it. Sending this message was important to us, and now the final line, which became the title of the article, we considered ourselves to be a powerful culture. We're not some idiots from 10,000 years ago that didn't know how to do anything. We were powerful, and we had the power to destroy the planet many times over, so you should pay attention to what we're saying, because we mean business. The funny thing is, I mentioned the increasing popularity of the task force and nuclear semiotics. This message has become a meme. This is one example. Someone turned it into like a nice welcome home plaque. In this house, we believe this is not a place of honor. Nothing is valued here. I tried to buy one of these, and it kind of got lost in shipping, but I will get them, and I will put it up in my house. I promise you this. Okay, but so on. That sucks. It's just a lingual message. We're in a data visualization conference. I'm running out of time. Let's talk about some visualizations. So very interestingly, this overlaps with Amanda's visualization of faces, because the first thing they did is, okay, how do we convey emotion with something that lasts? The human face. And Team B has these super weird diagrams of different emotions and how you convey them. That's mournful. That's physically hurt. Is it? That's frightened, panic-stricken, anguished, nauseated, bitter, and woeful. And their idea was to incorporate these faces as part of the warning, right? So let's say you don't know what danger means, and you forgot what the trefol means, and all these fancy words. You see those guys, and you're like, I mean, the intention is, those guys are not having a good time, right? Like, I don't want to be that guy. Maybe I should go away because this is where I would look like this if I went in. Of course, these guys were very smart. I'm making fun of them, which is okay, but they were smart. They weren't stupid. So they took this symbol and the messages, and they started designing how the actual site would look. So it would have 3 pillars. They're facing in different directions. So if wind erosion is predominant in one, it will only erase that message. And the other message won't be erased, right? Because the wind direction would be different. The message is inscribed on 2 sides of the pillars. And as you near the center of this installation, you get more and more data on what's happening. So even if only the periphery remains, or the core remains, you have the message spread out all across the, what they call the vaults, right? And with all these different markers. And this seems pretty nice. This looks like, I don't know, like a show in the 60s with the huge amplifiers, or like a rock show, right? But they didn't want it to feel nice. They wanted to feel scary. So they also added all these architectural features which they visualized. Oh, by the way, this is where the image quality starts to degrade because we don't really have these images. It's all like a government report that's on their site in crappy resolution. So some of these images might be a bit hard to see, but this one is pretty clear. They started sketching all these huge spikes that appear from out of the ground and are supposed to be daunting, right? Like if you come across these spikes, you're like, yeah, this is not a place of honor, right? Nothing valued is here. This place is bad. More articulations of these spikes. By the way, if you think about the ambition here, these spikes are made of concrete and sand and different anthropomasses, right, connecting to the previous talk, to prevent erosion, right? And that's why they're in these different angles. And look how massive they are. Like this is a person, and this is the spike. The intent here is also to create this idea of we consider ourselves to be a powerful culture, right? We weren't some people that didn't know what they're doing. We had the technical means to change the Earth and the planet. This is a wall on the periphery that is supposed to prevent people from entering the site. And these, super interesting, are sketches of the actual installation and what it might look like. So this one is those pillars that we saw alongside the message repeated in other United Nations languages. Up top, you see a room. In the center of the installation, there was a series of rooms that if they survived and you have the language, you can really dive deep into what's happening. By the way, the main fear was that the radiation would be tampered with and would get into the waterbed. Because if that happens, then basically the entire US topographical area is dead. Because from that waterbed, it can expand to the rest of the continent and poison everything that it touches. So if you get to the point where you understand enough science and language to get to the center, you have a map up top that shows you the flow of all the rivers. Again, I would love to show you it, but it's not available online. And this is what that room looks like. It's buried underground, again, to protect it from erosion, where you see all of these messages. Oh, and here, yeah, I actually found it. It's just, you can't really see it. This is the map that shows the river flows and how the nuclear waste might expand through it. And this map, by the way, was etched on the ground in the design, right? So you would walk on it and understand the scale and be able to see exactly where the waste goes. And this is just a taste. The report is readily available online. It's not nice reading, but it's interesting reading. Again, Team B, because of all these lens and visualizations and design that they went to. Okay, so what? A bunch of guys got together and they made a report. By the way, the United States implemented 0 of this. As of today, the United States does not have a central repository of its nuclear waste. The first suggestion, the first bill to actually institute it into law was passed in the 70s, and then it was repealed multiple times, including during the Obama administration, the Bush administration, the Trump administration. It's a real bipartisan issue how much America doesn't care about the nuclear waste that it makes. None of this was implemented. Okay, so what? First off, they failed. Like they failed in the basic mission, which is designing a good message for the future. When I finished reading this, I was like, this is the best you could do? A bunch of weird faces with messages on them and spikes coming out of the ground. Like, again, smart people, and I appreciate the work that they did, but it feels so lacking. Like if you want to convey fear and anxiety and sickness, I was really underwhelmed by the results of their work. And it's interesting to me to look at why they failed. I forgot my usual caveat when talking at ISVIS. I'm not a designer. I consider myself aesthetically challenged. So this is really privileged of me to say, like, they did a bad job, and then I have no suggestions what to do better. But this is why I'm talking to you guys, because we should do better. Like, this problem still exists. The US is still making nuclear waste, and not just the US. Russia and France and Germany, maybe Israel, I mean, yes, right, but we're not allowed to say. And other places, like, this is still a problem. The future is still fucked by this nuclear waste, and there is no good solution. So I'm challenging you guys that know how to do data visualization to come up with a better solution. because it's important that we do, and that's one of my reasons for talking here today. But lastly, my main reason for this is to give an example of when data visualization is actually called upon by the powers that be to imagine the future. And it's always when shit goes wrong, right? It's not when stuff is right and we need to visualize, I don't know, how we can make this new awesome technology equal to all, or how we can come together to solve some sort of problem. It's always like, listen guys, you're like the designers, we messed all this stuff up. Can you come in and like tell people that we did it? Is that really when we want data visualization to be used by policymakers to visualize the future? Or more interestingly, this is a quote from Franco Birardi, a really important Italian philosopher, in his excellent, incredible, every single person should read it, After the Future. And I just this is when he talks about G20, right? When politicians come in and they do G20 and all these G8 and conventions and stuff like that. They were completely unable to say or do anything meaningful. So they have decided that by 2050, toxic emissions will be reduced by half. How? Why? No answer. No political or technological action has been taken. No shorter deadline has been decided upon. Such a decision is like a shaman's ritual, like a rain dance. The complexity of the problems exceeds world politicians' powers of knowledge and influence. The future has escaped the grasp of political technique and everything has capsized. Same thing here. They make a report. Why? To make a report. Because that's what governments do. They make reports. But were there any policy recommendations? No. The little policy recommendations that were there, were they implemented? No. Were further committees called to elaborate this report and act upon it? No. It's just going through the motions of governance instead of actually doing fucking governance, right? And they bring in data visualizers, you guys, and designers to make those motions look viable and give it credence. Look at all these wonderful illustrations and sketches and diagrams, right? They're basically using visualization as a rubber stamp to give this shaman's ritual some form of seriousness. Okay, last few things. I'm sorry, again. I don't have a good solution. Like all the people said, it's the climate panel, right? So there is no good solution. And I'm sorry, I wish I was in a position to say I would do it differently or I would design it differently and so on. But this is really where I'm stressing again my appeal to you. Like if anybody is interested in this and in doing a better job and thinking about this in more interesting ways, contact me, come talk to me. I really, really want to do something with this in the next coming years and maybe take another shot at this that doesn't suck and doesn't focus more on poetry than on actual viable policy that can be enacted. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.